The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was one of the largest states in early modern Europe. Formed in 1569 after the Union of Lublin, it was a composite monarchy. At its height, it consisted of the Kingdom of Poland, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Condominium of Livonia, and the vassal states of Prussia and Courland. In this union, the monarch was elected by the nobility, which comprised about 10% of the country's population. Surrounded by kaisers, tsars, kings, and sultans, Poland-Lithuania was an outlier in its time, an island of republicanism in the sea of autocracy. Its cities enjoyed self-government, and its nobility boasted about its rights and liberties. Yet the ultimate fate of the Commonwealth was to fall, partitioned by autocrats who treated its republican practices as a weakness to be exploited. In this video, we will explore Poland-Lithuania, its government, and its unique political system, once a source of noble pride, yet the origin of its demise. This video is made available for free thanks to our YouTube members and patrons. We fund our free content through our program of exclusive videos made for our members and patrons, who get 2 documentaries per week not available to the public. Join their ranks and watch the series on the Albigensian Crusade, Fall of Sparta, First Punic War, Italian Reunification Wars, History of Prussia, Biography of Sulla, Russo-Japanese War, Reconquista, Persian Wars, and War of Spanish Succession, and much more. All this is made for and with generous donations from our backers. So if you're enjoying our content and want to see more and support the cause of history, consider becoming a YouTube member or patron. We rely on our backers to support our growing team pumping out these videos, so thank you to everyone already involved, and we hope you'll consider joining in too. The state of Poland-Lithuania was first and foremost a republic, a word understood by its citizens quite literally, as the Poles called it Rzeczpospolita, a direct translation of the Latin term res publica, much like the English word Commonwealth. However, it would be wrong to consider Poland-Lithuania as a modern liberal democracy. Contemporary state theorists regarded it as a mixed monarchy, a system that traces its origins to ancient philosophers and statesmen like Aristotle, Polybius, and Cicero. Mixed monarchies are designed to simultaneously incorporate 3 modes of government: monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. In the Commonwealth, they were embodied respectively by the King, the Senate, and the Chamber of Deputies. Citizens of Poland-Lithuania knew and eagerly read the works of Roman authors, and later the works of their medieval and Renaissance Italian descendants. A 16th century Polish writer, Stanisław Orzechowski, made clear references to Cicero when he described a commonwealth as an assembly of citizens in both a society of law and common welfare. A 17th century political thinker, Andrzej Maximilian Fredro, defined Poland-Lithuania as a commonwealth of provinces, highlighting both its uniqueness and its similarities to contemporary and ancient states like the Republic of Venice or the city-states of Athens or Sparta, all 3 of which he likened to urban commonwealths. Having set up the 3 pillars that made up the Polish-Lithuanian state apparatus, let us now explore each of those pillars in more detail, starting with the monarchy. The monarchy of Poland-Lithuania was embodied, unsurprisingly, by the king. Since the death of Kazimierz the Great in 1370, Polish monarchs were elected by parliament, and after the Jagiellonian line died out, this system of elective monarchy took hold in Lithuania as well. Polish-Lithuanian kings did not have to be elected from within. In fact, it was not uncommon for the Polish parliament to elect foreigners to the throne, with some examples including such figures as Henri Valois, Stefan Batory, Sigismund III Vasa, and Augustus the Strong. Much like the citizens of the Roman Republic, the people of Poland tended to distrust kings and the institution of kingship. To quote an anonymous participant of the Rzeczpospolita rebellion, the nature of regum is, when at war, to plan how to seize others' possessions, and when idle, to desire absolute power over their nation. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, Polish-Lithuanian nobles widely shared those suspicions, and the fear of absolute rule was one of the worst phobias in Poland, just as it was in England after the signing of the Magna Carta. Those worries were not unfounded. Thanks to their position and wealth, Polish kings often dominated politics, formulated domestic and foreign policy, proposed legislation, vetoed parliamentary bills, and through patronage and flattery, formed royalist factions in the parliament. Kings could also issue decrees in areas under royal jurisdiction, such as on the rights and privileges of cities, the opening of mines, and the ins and outs of Jewish affairs. The monarchs governed their domains through ministers, who were divided into two cadres, one for Poland and the other for Lithuania. The great marshals governed the royal court, dictating ceremonies, setting food prices, and supervising judicial proceedings. The great chancellors oversaw government operations and carried on correspondence. They were also the closest thing to modern foreign ministers, since the chancellors of Poland took charge of relations with the West, while the chancellors of Lithuania directed foreign relations with Russia. The great treasurers, unsurprisingly, supervised the royal treasuries and administered expenditures. Last but not least, the great hetmans exercised command over the army, formulated military policy, and maintained diplomatic missions in the Ottoman Empire. The main constraint to royal power in Poland-Lithuania was the Commonwealth's strong adherence to the rule of law. When the king tried to enforce his policies and ignored legal procedures, the nobles opposed him stubbornly, even if they agreed with the substance of those policies. Such was the case in 1646, when King Władysław IV Vasa attempted to raise an army to fight the Ottomans and Crimeans without the consent of parliament. The great Chancellor of Lithuania, Albrecht Stanisław Radziwiłł, claimed that he would prefer to have his hand cut off than sign his name and put his seal under such a document. The great Chancellor of Poland, Jerzy Ossoliński, was of the same opinion, despite agreeing in principle with the need to raise an army. To address the other two pillars of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, namely the aristocratic and the democratic pillars, we must take a look at the parliament. The parliament of the Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth was a body with immense political importance and met at least once every 2 years. Most sessions took place in Warsaw, with every third session taking place in Rodno. In Poland-Lithuania, only Parliament could pass laws concerning most state affairs. Parliament raised the army, controlled ennoblements, issued pardons, and granted amnesties. One of the governmental offices, the Greater Treasurer, reported to Parliament rather than the king. This body was bicameral. The upper chamber, the Senate, represented the aristocratic component of the Commonwealth. In 1569, it included 140 members, 95 from Poland and 45 from Lithuania. For most Polish kings, this was a friendly chamber, peopled by aristocrats whom they themselves appointed. Although the Senate could not initiate bills, it influenced their development a lot by mediating, drafting compromise proposals, and giving eloquent speeches. The Senate could also exercise veto power, but we'll talk more on that later. Let us turn our attention to the lower chamber, also known as the Chamber of Deputies. This was the democratic element of the Commonwealth. It consisted of 122 delegates from Poland and 48 from Lithuania, all elected by the provincial diets. In practice, this chamber represented a rather narrow political elite. Deputies commonly held provincial office, and about 1/3 of the lower chamber was comprised of the magnates, the richest stratum of the nobility. On the local level of provincial diets, those deputies were elected by noblemen by a simple majority vote. The original role of the Chamber of Deputies was to merely ratify the decisions of the king and the senators. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the deputies were mostly busy with amending royal proposals and suggesting alternatives. The final votes took place at the very end, in a joint session of both the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies. Let us take a closer look at this voting system. The Polish-Lithuanian Parliament had a crucially important gimmick. All decisions had to be made unanimously. In this early modern Commonwealth of provinces had something in common with the modern European Union. Multiple political thinkers of the time vigorously defended the policy of unanimous voting. For example, the Jesuit Piotr Skaga argued that this principle made the parliament respect the common good, and that the majority ought to convince the minority, not outvote it. Other thinkers argued that unanimity was better than a majority vote because a majority vote would result in factionalism and lead to Parliament passing bills because of political pressure and royal patronage, not because of their merit. The majority, they claimed, would also ignore the interests of particular regions, even if they were in trouble, were they not represented in their voting bloc. The logical consequence of the unanimous voting was that just one no vote was enough to kill any legislation. This phenomenon became known as the liberum veto and was perhaps the defining feature of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Many contemporaries understood how harmful this principle could be. One Polish political writer, Jan Ostrorog, argued that this kind of government is a great shame if the republic can be brought to ruin through the stupidity or stubbornness of a single individual. A different deputy criticized the liberum veto, noting, "There is no reason why we should all perish because of the obstinacy of one palatinate." From the 17th century onwards, deputies invoked the liberum veto more frequently, often due to growing suspicions of the king, the government, and the Senate. Local diets gave their deputies more specific instructions, leaving them little room for compromise. In 1652, for the first time, the entire parliamentary session was made pointless by a single protest on a single issue. From 1573 to 1763, about one-third of parliaments failed to pass a single law. Originally a measure against factionalism, the liberum veto became a common tool in factional infighting. It was only abolished in 1792. Given how inconvenient the unanimity principle was for the government, it is unsurprising that there were ways to bypass it. There we approach the concept of confederation, a term which has its own separate meaning in the Polish-Lithuanian context. Confederations arose in the late Middle Ages and were comprised of nobles or cities that took up arms during crises and emergencies. A confederation could be organized in a single province, and if other provinces joined, it would become a general confederation. Confederations elected their own government, complete with their own marshals and military commanders. They also held their own general council, in which majority rule was the norm. In the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, confederations tended to spring up during interregna, between the death of an old monarch and the election of a new one. During this time, the primate of the Catholic Church acted as regent, and the parliament wore hooded capes as a sign of mourning. These hooded parliaments were technically confederated, and could thus ignore the unanimity rule temporarily. Another common cause for the creation of a confederation was to oppose the will of the king. One of the golden liberties of the nobility included the right to rebel against a monarch who violated his oaths. These rebel confederations were called rokosz. To react against a rokosz, the king could organize his own confederation comprised of his loyal supporters. In some cases, nobles could organize a confederation without invoking the right of rebellion, and would simply help the king govern more effectively. The king could even join a confederation, and in these cases, its general council became a legal parliament. One of the aspects of confederations was that they had to be organized separately in Poland and Lithuania. At this point, we should address the federal structure of the Commonwealth and how decentralized it really was. Since its very foundation in Lublin in 1569, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was devised as a federal union, comprised of two previously independent states, which for the past 2 centuries just had happened to share a monarch. Although Poland was the more powerful of the two, Lithuania stubbornly defended its autonomy. Its nobility, increasingly Polish in language, culture and religion, maintained a strong Lithuanian political identity. Lithuanian autonomism and even separatism remained a feature in the history of the Commonwealth until the partitions. Even shortly after, a celebrated Polish-speaking poet, Adam Mickiewicz, opened his epic Pan Tadeusz with the words, "Lithuania, my homeland." In some sense, this uneasy union could be compared to the one between England and Scotland, with the latter being somewhat anglicised and historically dominated by its larger partner, yet very much aware of its own history and identity. Another source of decentralization was the power of the noble families. In theory, all members of the nobility were equal. However, in reality, this class was stratified, with the small number of magnates towering over the middle and poor noblemen. In the 17th century, magnates concentrated enough power and wealth to dominate their less prosperous neighbors and turn them into their clients. As we have mentioned before, the power of the king and the central government was limited. As a result, decision-making was largely made in the provincial diets, which magnates were able to control. Each magnate family pursued its own interests, often without regard for the common cause. Thus, the Commonwealth slowly turned into a loose union of petty magnate kingdoms. In the words of a Polish historian, Antoni Munczak, this constituted a dominance of periphery. The citizens of the Commonwealth were well aware of the dangers of disintegration, discord, and anarchy. Given the relative lack of state coercion, the fate of the Commonwealth ultimately depended on free-willed individuals, their behavior and attitude. Thus, the questions of ethics in Poland-Lithuania were key for the very functioning of the state. Political thinkers of the Commonwealth once again found the solution in the works of Roman authors, primarily Cicero. They recognized civic virtue as the main principle of a republic. Only virtue, they claimed, would reduce the selfish attitudes of the citizens, preventing the state as a whole from falling into anarchy, and decline while its citizens experienced loss of freedom. The virtues in question were also drawn from the Romans, and were primarily prudence and fortitude. The free Pole was supposed to be courageous in battle, wise in council, love his homeland, and prioritize the public good over individual gain. In Poland-Lithuania, the discourse about civic virtue coexisted with Christian ethics, which contrasted with the secular works of Italian and French writers like Machiavelli or Montesquieu. The general view was that a good Christian made a good citizen. In the words of a contemporary, holy faith and the very commandments of God should prepare us for political virtues, so necessary for the good government of the kingdom. Throughout the existence of the Commonwealth, its political thinkers agreed that the political as well as the moral imperative of the citizen was to participate in public life, keep watch over the homeland, and defend the nation and freedom. A good citizen was supposed to make decisions favorable to the Republic, even if they did not serve one's individual interests. The guiding principle for the citizens was Cicero's quote, "Salus populi suprema lex esto," the health of the people should be the supreme law. Although seemingly positive for the life of the Commonwealth, the appraisal of civic virtue contributed to its eventual downfall. Contemporary discussions of politics are full of lamentation about the decline of virtue. Ultimately, every problem in Poland-Lithuania was attributed to moral decline. This was a strong argument against any political reform. The Conservatives claimed that the state institutions, even the liberum veto, worked flawlessly as long as people were driven by the public good. Instead of improving the system, they aimed to improve the people. In this sense, pragmatism lost to moralism. Ultimately, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth fell, jointly partitioned by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Its demise could be attributed to a number of factors, including the wartime devastation, economic stagnation, and the decline of its potential allies, Sweden and the Ottoman Empire. The most often cited reason, however, is political. The Commonwealth, divided and embroiled in internal conflicts, was unable to stand its ground against its decisive, autocratic neighbours. In the future, we're planning to explore this dramatic chain of events. A video covering the partitions of Poland, as well as more videos on Eastern European history, are on the way. So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.